So hello friends, again from Chambers, and let's talk about the new bacteria in this video. Maybe we take the two bacteria in these two videos. The Neisseria species we'll be talking today. Okay, let us share the screen. If we remember from our previous concepts that gram-negative cocci, we said gram-negative cocci were NMCV. We said many NMCV. Neisseria, Moraxera catralis, and Villanella, isn't it? Neisseria, Moraxella catralis, and Villanella, isn't it? So these bacteria we said are actually the gram-negative cocci, and we said that Neisseria. I think I have told in the previous lectures that Neisseria is cat positive, ox positive, non-motile, no, non-motile, and aerobic. This is the most important bacteria. Okay. So Neisseria is cat positive, ox positive, non-motile, and aerobic, gram negative. Okay. Now Neisseria has two species. Neisseria is a big family, but Neisseria has two species which are pathogenic to humans. That is Neisseria meningitis and Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Neisseria meningitis and Neisseria meningitis and Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Okay. And it's not only this, these two will be causing the disease in the humans. These two will be causing the disease in the humans, and other species of Neisseria will be a normal flora, a natural commensals of your genital tract, of your intestinal tract, of your oral cavity. So only two species are pathogenic, disease causing to humans: Neisseria meningitis and Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Neisseria meningitis and Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Now these two have differences. Neisseria meningitis and Neisseria gonorrhoeae. They have differences. How will you differentiate them? That is the most important question. Okay. So let us draw a line the old way, like I learned in my medical school. How we put like this. We put like this. We will differentiate them. And meningitis, and this is an gonorrhea. Okay, and meningitis and gonorrhea. Now, how to remember that N meningitis is capsulated. N meningitis is capsulated. This is non-capsulated. This is lens-shaped or half-moon shaped. Lens-shaped or half-moon shaped. Okay, but this is kidney shaped. This is kidney shaped. Okay. Can you see the G? See how I remember. Can you see I draw? How do I write the G? My way of writing G is like this. So if I see it is a left kidney, like something like, kidney type of a thing. So I remember gonorrhea like this. Okay. Gonorrhea like this. So if I say the kidney, it is kidney shaped, it means this diplococci, that means this diplococci, it is a diplococci actually, isn't it? It's a diplococci. Both of them are diplococci. But what is the difference? Then if I say one thing is lens shaped or one thing is half moon shaped, it means diplococci has the sides flattened. If it is a lens shaped, it has a flattened sides. Its adjacent sides have been flattened. The two diplococci have adjacent side. Because once you make a lens, you draw two surfaces, isn't it? When you make a lens of your eye, you draw two surfaces. Or if you have to make a kidney, you have to draw two surfaces to make them. So that's why we are arranging that diplococcus into, we are telling that one is a lens shaped, one is a half moon shaped, another is a kidney shaped. Now biochemically, if I have a difference between the two, so biochemically, N meningitis will ferment your glucose. N meningitis will ferment maltose. but N. gonori will ferment only glucose. So from the biochemical point of view, ferments glucose, ferments maltose. This only glucose, only glucose. This is fermentation point of view. This is fermentation point of view. Now, who is responsible? How Neisseria gonorrhoeae will be having the resistance for drugs? What is the mechanism? Plasmid mediated. Plasmid mediated is the way it is getting the resistance. We have read it in the general microbiology. Okay. Now there are two forms of both. This is having some may be having intracellular form, some may be having extracellular form. So Neisseria meningitis has both forms. It is in intracellular form also. It is in extracellular form also. But Neisseria gonorrhoeae is, so gonorrhea is in. Okay. Then your whole mnemonic is gone. So gonorrhea is in. This is meningitis is in plus X. In plus X. If I go into the laboratory, laboratory when I check the colonies are circular. Colonies are circular. But if I go into gonorrhea, sometimes circular, sometimes something. So variability, there is variability in size, and the margins are not very well demarcated. So where will you see this Neisseria meningitis? Important thing. Where does it live? What is the place it lives? Does it live in the Scenic Colony? Does it live in the 21st Street? Does it live on the Residency Road? Where does he live? He lives in the nasopharynx. He lives in the nasopharynx. Remember, meningitis, nasopharynx. This G has so many meanings, isn't it? This G has so many meanings. This G is, no, it can change your life, isn't it? It can change your life in studies. How? It is present in the genital tract, urethra, cervix. Okay, I won't say it is not present in the nasopharynx. Can be, maybe, but rarely. But rarely. I can say rarely. Rarely is a very nice word to explain. So, in short, sir, what to remember? Meningitis, nasopharynx, gonorrhea, genital tract. Simple motto. Once you are landing yourself into some research, so you can be my guest. Most welcome to confuse yourselves in the research at this undergraduate level. So go to authentic books. There are all standard books have made all the things very much clear. You don't need to land into confusion. So why this happens, why this not happens. Only relevant questions should be thought, which are relevant from your undergraduate point of view. Not start thinking of doctorate level of thing, which requires at least a master's level of information and a very nice hold of the undergraduate information. So if I talk now, I take a bacteria. The bacteria is, because in the exam they won't check your how many books you have read. They will check the information you have in hand. You have a confused information in your hand, then the exam is gone. Okay, guys. So anyone sleeping? Anyone is sleeping in the class? No one is sleeping in the class. Should not sleep. Not sleep. This time is for work, not for sleep. It's early morning, isn't it? Should not sleep. So see, if I take the bacteria, now I take the first bacteria, that is the Neisseria meningitis. Let me write today very nicely. Meningococcus, you can say. Meningococcus. Now this meningococcus, we know everything in the above. I have given you everything in the beginning. Don't need to think again and again. Okay. If I talk, what did we study in the meningococcus? First, we said it has a capsular polysaccharide. It has a capsular polysaccharide. Now, if I have a capsule and this is my macrophage, what will happen? It will slip. It will slip once he tries to have phagocytosis. It will slip, isn't it? It will slip. Once you want to grasp a slippery thing in your hand, it slips from your hand, isn't it? So it actually is anti-phagocytic. It will prevent the phagocytosis. Now it has three serotypes, not three actually, 13 serotypes or 13 serogroups. So which serogroups will cause the disease? Majority of the disease will be caused by which serogroup? So A, B, C, not D, Y, and W135. These you have to remember. So A, B, C, Y, W, 135. These are the five serogroups which you will see the majority of the cases causing meningitis. Okay. Now it is having some special things. It has some special things. Okay. So the special things means I have to talk about the virulence factors. If I talk about the virulence factors, what has the virulence factors? First, I can write the capsular polysaccharide. Second, it has an IgA1 protease. IgA1 protease. It has LPO. It has OMP, outer membrane proteins. Outer membrane proteins. Transferrin binding proteins. Transferrin binding proteins. Okay. It has pili. So these are the virulence factors which you can think in this. Okay. If I take their little function. So what will be this doing? Let us talk about the this outer membrane proteins will give you the type, isn't it? The serotype will be based on serogroups. If I talk about this LPO, this LPO is responsible for many things. I have to explain this. This LPO, what it is doing actually is it causes a syndrome. It causes a syndrome. The syndrome is known as Waterhouse Federation syndrome, or I can write like this. See what happens. Uh, this is my blood vessel. This is my blood vessel. This is my blood vessel. Endothelial cells. What it does, once this LPO comes, what it will do? It will do endothelial injury. Endothelial injury will happen. Now, if endothelial injury happens, there is a natural mechanism of inflammation, begins the inflammation, and you will have increased vascular permeability. You will have intense vascular permeability. Now things are permeable, isn't it? Things will start becoming permeable. Now tell me the fluid level in the blood, the fluid of the blood, the fluid content of the blood, will it get decreased or increased? In the blood, I am talking. In the blood. In the blood, it will get decreased because fluid is leaking into interstitial spaces. Fluid is leaking into interstitial spaces. Okay. So what will happen? I will have less fluid in the blood. That means things can't reach to the places. Things can't reach the organs. Blood can't reach the organs. What will happen? This will cause shock. What is shock? Shock, you should remember one line only. It is a state of intense hypoperfusion. Perfusion means the blood flow to that part. So the hypoperfusion will happen because the viscosity and other factors will start increasing. The viscosity and other factors will start increasing or leading to the sluggish flow of the blood. It won't be flowing in that streamlined flow. It will be having turbulence, it will be having stasis, it will be causing hypercoagulability and much more. So this is the concept what this liposaccharide and endotoxin is doing. Now, will it cause DIC? I have taught you, disseminated intravascular coagulation, because I have endothelial injury and I am what doing? Intravascular thrombosis. What I am doing? Intravascular thrombosis. I am doing intravascular thrombosis. So once I am doing intravascular thrombosis, my all the consumption coagulopathy will happen. Consumptive coagulopathy, that is the disseminated intravascular coagulation will happen. So this is intravascular thrombosis leading to the disseminated intravascular coagulation. Disseminated, let me write for you people. Disseminated intravascular coagulation. So this is the concept which it will be doing. Okay. So second syndrome which it causes is Waterhouse. I'm talking about this. Okay. So Waterhouse Federation syndrome. So what is happening in the Waterhouse Federation syndrome? Yes, someone contribute. Waterhouse Federation syndrome. So what is happening? That you have adrenal insufficiency. It is basically your adrenals will be adrenal dysfunction will happen. Adrenal dysfunction. Okay, this is the thing he will be doing. Okay, so they will be damaging your adrenal glands. So will it lead to the corticosteroids? There will be some insufficiency. There will be insufficient metabolism, isn't it? So remember, adrenal insufficiency should be remembered for this. Adrenal insufficiency. Adrenal insufficiency. So you won't be having any hormones anymore. You won't be having those corticosteroids, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids. So this is the concept. It was actually called, in our pathology language, it was called hemorrhagic adrenalitis. Hemorrhagic adrenalitis, or it was also called fulminant meningococcemia. Fulminant meningococcemia or hemorrhagic adrenalitis. So you will have bleeding in the adrenal glands. So most responsible is this Neisseria meningitis. Are we able to understand? Guys, it's important. I am saying this syndrome is important because Neisseria is only causing this. The bleeding, it is actually bleeding. Your adrenals are bleeding. Are you able to understand? So Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome, adrenal insufficiency, adrenal dysfunction, hemorrhagic adrenalitis, fulminant meningococcemia will happen. Okay. Now it is having, this was about what else we discussed. Did we write about this? Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome is done, and it can lead to MI also because it is causing intravascular coagulation, disseminated intravascular coagulation, compromising the blood flow, the coronary circulation, and finally will lead to the MI, myocardial infarction. Okay, myocardial infarction will happen. So fulminant meningococcemia is what you will be seeing. So this is having another protease, that is IgA protease. It has another protease, that is IgA protease. What is IgA protease? You have IgA antibodies lining your lips, your mucosal surfaces. So what will happen once you have this bacteria? It will destroy, it will cleave, it will damage your IgA. It will eat this IgA. So it has IgA proteases in Neisseria meningitis. Now what is this OPA protein, outer membrane protein? It will be, what it will be doing, it will be help you in the adhesion, getting fixed to that place where it has to cause the infection. Okay, easy. So how is the things happening? Why it is called meningitis? Because it causes meningitis. So what is meningitis? Meningitis is the infection or the inflammation of your meninges for your first year point of view. Meninges. So you have meninges in the brain. You have coverings in the brain. So you have what? Pia mater. Okay. So pia mater, arachnoid mater and dura mater. So now tell me, where is the space now? What is the space between dura mater and arachnoid mater? So below the arachnoid is subarachnoid space. Below the arachnoid is subarachnoid space. Subarachnoid means below. So below the arachnoid is subarachnoid space. So what is below the dura? Subdural space. So this is brain parenchyma. This is the pia mater. This is the subarachnoid where you have the CSF, 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 CSF. All CSF is in the subarachnoid. So remember, where is the subarachnoid? Below the arachnoid. So what is below the arachnoid? Subarachnoid. What is below the subarachnoid? Pia. Now above the arachnoid mater, what is there? Dura mater. Above the dura is below these. What is the space? The arachnoid and dura. What is the space between dura and arachnoid known as subdural space? Subdural space. So if I go, no, if I go into the neuroanatomy, if I start from the hair, okay, this is the scalp. This is the scalp, okay, scalp, skin of your scalp, and then we have what? We have what? We have aponeurosis, isn't it? We have aponeurosis. Then we have periosteum. If I am a neurosurgeon and I'm cutting the, penetrating the brain, what I will be seeing? The scalp, the aponeurosis, periosteum, isn't it? Periosteum. Then there will be skull bone. Then comes the dura mater. Then comes the dura. What is below dura? Well, let us write the layers first. Dura, arachnoid, and pia. DAP. Okay. Dura, arachnoid, and pia. What is in this space? Subarachnoid space. What is this space? Subdural space. Where is the CSF? Here is the CSF. If you see the clinical features of this patient, of the patient of Neisseria meningitis. So we were talking that once we have the droplet infection, what will happen? So once I get a droplet infection, what will happen? In the droplet infection, see what happens. Once the droplets go to me, it will go to the lungs. So lungs, there will be also some inflammation and all. And it also will reach the what? Blood. So hematogenous. So if something is spreading through the blood, we call it hematogenous. Now in the blood, so blood is also supplying to what? Brain. Blood is supplying the brain, and brain has meninges. Brain has meninges. So he will have meningitis. So what are the features of meningitis? First, sir, it is an infection, so there will be fever. Second, sir, he will vomit. He will be having vomiting. Third, he will be having neck rigidity. You know neck rigidity? Okay, I'll be teaching you a sign in the pathology or in the first year, this physiology, a sign. Okay, so fourth is headache, and there will be rashes. Okay, this is what you have to remember. These are the signs of meningitis. So the clinical features, now they will ask you what are the clinical manifestations of this. They will be asking you what are the clinical features of meningococcal infection. So what is the clinical presentation? See, patient is mostly asymptomatic. That is, symptoms are not there. Asymptomatic. He will have asymptomatic colonization first. He will have colonies inside but no symptoms. But his manifestations, what will be the manifestations if he will be having what? Rash. This rash is important, by the way. This rash is important because this rash is a non-blanching rash or non-blanchable rash. That is, it can be what? Petechiae. I'll be teaching you petechiae in the thrombo disease. Petechiae or purpura. It can be petechiae or purpura. Okay. Second thing the person will be having is the same Water-Friderichsen syndrome. So when he has Waterhouse Friderichsen syndrome, what will happen? He will be having purpura. So we call it purpuric rashes. We call it purpuric rashes. That is known in dermatology as purpura fulminans. Purpura fulminans. Will he have shock? Yes, he will have shock. He will have shock. Will he have DIC? Will he have DIC? Yes, sir, he will have DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation. Will he have, adrenal failure? Will he have multi-organ failure? That is known as MODY, multi-organ dysfunction. Multi-organ dysfunction. Now tell me, will he have pyogenic meningitis also? Pyogenic means pus producing. Will he have pyogenic? Will he have pyogenic meningitis? Yes, he will have pyogenic. I'm telling you all the manifestations that a meningococcal infection can manifest to us. Pyogenic meningitis. Okay. But mostly, if you suspect a pyogenic meningitis, it will mostly be 3 to 5-year-old patient. It will be a 3 to 5-year-old patient who will be having pyogenic meningitis. Okay. Now, a patient is coming to me. Now I give you a case. 2 cases I give you. Okay. Should we give you 2 cases to differentiate 2 conditions? Guys, what's up? Okay. So I am giving you 2 conditions. First, number A patient. Number A patient is a patient who is having petechial rash. He has petechial rash. I don't have a diagram right now. I'll be giving you the diagram in later videos. I have a petechial rash and I have fever. Okay, please write this case. Petechial rash, fever, arthritis, your joints are involved, arthritis, and splenomegaly. Once you see this is what? It's not pyogenic, it's actually chronic meningococcemia. It is chronic meningococcemia. Now I give you next. Patient got a meningococcal disease. You have confirmed it. Now what happened? After 4 to 10 days, that is after 4 to 10 days, what happened 4 to 10 days? He started having arthritis, rash. If I go into ophthalmology, he started having iritis, pericarditis. What was other? Polyserositis. He started having fever. These all things were so this condition is called, which is developing after 4 to 10 days of meningococcal infection, is known as, it comes in the meningococcal actually, it is the post-meningococcal, after the meningococcal actually, post-meningococcal reactive disease. Post-meningococcal reactive disease. Can we remember the differences between the two? So fever, arthritis, splenomegaly, chronic meningococcemia, post-meningococcal reactive disease, arthritis, rash, iritis, pericarditis, polycerositis, and fever. How people to understand? So meningococcal infections, if they tell you what is meningococcal infection, you will say rashes, septicemia, pyogenic meningitis, chronic meningococcemia, post-meningococcal reactive disease, septicemia. If they tell you what is post-meningococcal reactive disease, alag se, he will ask you to alag se, what is post-meningococcal reactive disease? You will say, sir, after the 4 to 10 days, there will be immune complex formation. Okay. Immune complexes will form, which will start damaging the tissues like arthritis, rash, iritis, pericarditis, fever, polycerositis. If they ask you what is features of chronic meningococcemia, petechial rash, fever, arthritis, splenomegaly. Now I'll be diagnosing how to diagnose meningococcemia or meningococcal Neisseria meningitis infection. What we do, we take 3 samples of CSF. Now tell me one thing. We have the meninges, what we have discussed is the pia mater, dura mater. Now we have this subarachnoid space where we can see this CSF flowing. There is CSF in the subarachnoid space. Now infection is happening to the meninges. So will the infective neutrophils, pus cells, will they be present in the CSF also or not? Okay. So will I do a lumbar puncture? Will I do a lumbar puncture LP or spinal tapping? So I'll be doing a lumbar puncture. So I will be needing the same sample, because if I have something in blood, I will take the blood sample. If I have something in the urine, it's common sense, my dears, it's common sense. Medical science is common sense mostly. So if I have infection in blood, I will have lymphocyte, I will check the blood. If I have something in the GIT, I will check the stools. If I have something in the nasal, I will check the nasal secretions. It's so easy. If I have an ear infection, I will take the ear vaccine sample. If I have a skin infection, I will take that pus area and check under the culture and microscope. Isn't it easy? Why? I don't know why they are making medical science so tough. It's so common sense. So it's LP. LP I will be taking, and LP I will be taking 3 tubes. What? 3 tubes. Have you seen the tubes of lumbar puncture? Have you seen lumbar puncture? What we do, we put the patient in the left recumbent position. This is the table, and this is the patient's head. This is his back. These are the buttocks. So he is, like this, like a baby. He's folded like a baby in your fetal position, so that his spines and this become prominent, so that we can create a space between the spines and put our needle, LP needle. So once we are putting this LP needle, now this is the hair of the patient. Okay, he's at the back. This is the back side. Okay, let us draw the buttocks, and then you can understand that this is the back side. Okay, so how to draw the buttocks? So I don't know, like this. Okay, his legs are like this. Okay, I hope you understand. So we are doing the lumbar puncture, and we are drawing. We are taking 3 tubes. So 3 tubes we are taking. In one tube, second tube, third tube. First tube we will send to microbiological examination, microbiology lab. Second will be sent to pathology lab. Third will be sent to biochemistry department. So we will send the 3 samples to 3 departments: microbiology department, pathology department, biochemistry department. In microbiology, we will be checking all the features of microbiology. In pathology, we will check the cells. We will check the cells. In biochemistry, we will be checking the proteins and sugars. Proteins and sugars. Understood? So CSF, I will be teaching you the meningitis very detailed in the neuro anatomy and neurophysiology. Okay, we're teaching you the diagnosis of meningitis and also the treatment of meningitis. Here you can also learn the meningitis treatment. So what you will do is you will take a culture. Now you will culture them. Okay, you will culture them. So CSF you will culture. Okay. What else will you be seeing in the some people are asking biochemistry. So if we see the biochemistry, what you will be checking? You will check the protein. You will check the protein. Protein should be increased. Protein should increase, but glucose should be decreased. How I remember, I will be teaching you the difference between different types of meningitis: the viral meningitis, the bacterial meningitis, the tubercular meningitis. I'll be teaching you. I'll be teaching you that in the neuro anatomy. But here, remember, see, this is a bacteria, and remember how to remember that glucose is decreased is that this bacteria is eating the glucose. This bacteria is eating the glucose. So will that glucose decrease in the CSF or not? Think like that. I'm telling, think like that. Okay, so glucose will decrease. Protein is because of the something bacteria and all, and CSF pressure will increase. CSF pressure will increase. So what will be the features? We have increased CSF pressure if it is caused due to meningococcal meningitis. So protein will be, we have decreased glucose, increased proteins, and increased pressure of CSF. Increased pressure of CSF. Okay. If I gram stain them, if I gram stain this CSF, what I will be getting? Pus cells. Lens shaped. Remember lens shaped? Do we remember the lens shape? Yeah, we remember the lens shape. So if I take the culture, now if I take a culture, what I will be seeing on the culture, I will put it on which medium? Fast, which medium I have taught you? Which medium will I be putting this? Thayer-Martin medium, that's a beautiful answer. Thayer-Martin medium. We have learned this. So Thayer-Martin medium will be putting this and we'll be getting the colonies. Okay. I think I have to teach about the vaccines also, isn't it? The vaccines for this. Okay. So by the way, you can use the ELISA also for the diagnosis. You can also choose the PCR, but that PCR is a multiplex PCR, which will be for the molecular one. So biochemical test, you already know oxidase and CAD positive and all. Okay. I hope you can do it very nicely. Okay. So let us come back. Let us come to the treatment part first. So how will we treat the patient? Drug of choice is ceftriaxone, cephalosporin. Drug of choice treatment. Okay, how to treat? Drug of choice will be ceftriaxone, cefotaxime. Okay, but if you have carrier state, carrier, or if you want to give prophylaxis, what will be the drug? Drug of choice, ceftriaxone. Why you say but? Something so that you can remember. Okay, can give also what? Ciprofloxacin. You can give ciprofloxacin and you can give rifampicin. Okay, give ciprofloxacin, you can give rifampicin. Okay. Now we have vaccines. We have vaccines for this bacteria. We have vaccines. So what are the vaccines? We have, please remember, vaccines, meningococcal conjugate vaccines. Meningococcal conjugate vaccines. So they will ask you what strain will they give you protection, against which strain you will be protected when you take this vaccine. So you will be protected for ACWY. ACWY. We had groups. Now group B, the group B capsule we have. This was for ACWY. The group B capsule which we have is basically made up of what? It is made up of sialic acid. The group B capsule is made up of sialic acid. It is what? Enkephalotogenic. But see, tell me one thing. Do you want a vaccine which can produce more antibodies in your body or less antibodies? Do you want a vaccine which can give you sufficient amount of antibodies so that you can remain protected? Or should you get a less antibody titer? You should have an adequate, isn't it? You should have a nice titer of the antibodies. So will you give that vaccine only which is giving you a nice titer? Yes, sir, it will be giving you a nice titer. So B is not giving us a nice titer. That's why we don't have vaccine for group B. Otherwise, we could have made a vaccine for group B. But why we are not making the vaccine? Because it is poorly immunogenic. It is poorly, group B vaccines are poorly immunogenic. We can't, if we produce also, they won't be producing any antibodies in us. So it's, So, by the way, where do we give these vaccines? For which people? People going to Hajj pilgrimage, okay? People going to Hajj pilgrimage in the Muslim. So we give this vaccine. It is an indication. Okay, we are giving this vaccine. Which vaccine, my dear? Meningococcal conjugate vaccine. Okay. So this polyvalent vaccine, which is having the ACYW15, we are giving it to is an indication for Hajj pilgrims. Okay. So what dose do we give? Okay, so since some people are Muslims in our this classroom, so let us tell you the dosage. The dose is 50 micrograms, single dose. 50 micrograms, single dose. What will happen once you give the vaccine? Your immunity. I will add some more things, okay? Because some people in this are from this community. So immunity will start in the 10 days and give you immunity for how many years? 3 years. It will give you immunity for 3 years. So you give a dosage of 50 micrograms single dose and immunity will start. You will start become immune to the meningococcal infection in 10 days and you will have that for 3 years. Okay. But in which people you should not give this vaccine? I should tell you contraindications of this vaccine. Please, a big contraindication. The contraindication is pregnancy. Okay. And below 3 years of age, don't give this vaccine below 3 years, because it won't be, it is basically a, the capsule is T cell independent. Do we know from the concept that capsule was a T cell independent? Capsule was a T cell independent, so it won't be doing any immunity in the child. So what is the fun of giving it below the 3 years? So it is poorly immunogenic for a child less than 3 years of age. So you should give it after the 3 years of age. So I hope you have understood the today's topic, and I hope you have digested it well. In the next topic, we will be taking the next bacteria of this family. Please revise it at home. Read the books wherever you find problem. Please let me know. Book reading is important. My lectures you can listen, but after that you should go home and read the books. Wherever you find difficulty, any contradictions, any questions, any problems, you can definitely ask me. Okay. So thank you very much and have a nice day.